UFC Light Heavyweight Champion Jamal Hill repeats the fate of former champion Jiri Prochazka. He gets injured and leaves the belt vacant. At the moment, there is a challenger fight between Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira. However, other fighters at this weight may fight for the vacant belt. Hello fighters! With you the World of MMA channel. In today's video I will give a prediction for a potential fight for the vacant title between Jiri Prochazka and Magomed Ankalaev. But before you start this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss the next videos. Here we go. Magomed Ankalaev was born in Magomed in 1992 and now he is at his peak, although after each his performance it seems that he is still progressing. Of course, like any representative of Dagestan, Magomed knows how to wrestle. During his studies he was engaged in Greco-Roman wrestling. But later he focused on combat sambo, where he achieved serious successes, namely the title of Master of Sports. Because of a certain similarity between his discipline and MMA, Magomed decided to try himself at the amateur level in mixed martial arts. He tried and won Russian and world championships. And in 2014 began his professional career. 3.5 years, a 10-0 record and an invitation from the Dana White promotion. But the debut turned out to be a sad one. Ankalaev faced Paul Craig, and everything was going well. The Dagestani was taking the fight by decision. But at the very end, the Scotsman caught the Russian fighter in a triangle and finished with a second left in the fight. Magomed took a 6-month break and came back brightly. In half a round he knocked out Pragnio, and from there Ankalaev only gained more. The level of opposition was growing, but he continued to show readiness. He knocked out the tough Ion Cutelaba twice. In the first case there were questions about stopping the fight, but in the second one the referee was rather upset. In February 2021 Magomed had one of the most difficult fights of his career. Nikita Krylov looked great, but the Dagestani took the fight by decision. 6 months later the Dagestani met with the famous Özdemir. 4 years ago, Volkan fought for the title, but could not compete with Ankalaev. Magomed stepped up to the 6th position in the ratings and was challenged by former title challenger Thiago Santos. The fight was a cautious one. The Brazilian showed his class a few times, but the final victory of Magomed was no question. Dagestan got another former challenger, Anthony Smith. Anthony could not really oppose Ankalaev and in the middle of the second round was finished. 9 wins in a row and the question of who would fight for the vacant title wasn't even an issue. Last December he faced Jan Blachowicz for the vacant champion title at the UFC 282 tournament. However, Magomed did not manage to win the title, as the judges considered it a draw. Jiri Prochazka originally fought in the Russian promotions Fight Nights and Pro FC, and was the first to defeat Vadim Nemkov, the current Bellator Light Heavyweight Champion. His record in MMA is 29 wins and 3 losses. He is 30 years old and got into martial arts, like many, by accident. At the age of 6, he lost his father, and to somehow fill the void, young Jiri got into sports. Prochazka practiced in the soccer section. But this was not enough for the Czech, and to vent his aggression he went to judo, wrestling and karate. At the age of 16 Jiri moved to Brno and entered the training academy for police, firefighters and private security guards. One of the compulsory subjects was hand-to-hand combat. But it was not enough for him, and in his free time he visited a martial arts hall. After winning the Czech Muay Thai championship, Prochazka decided to focus on MMA. This is the baggage with which Jiri became a professional fighter. After 17 fights and 14 wins, he received an invitation from the Japanese organization Rizin, where he defeated Nemkov, but lost to Muhammad Lawal in the Grand Prix final. Since then, he has won 3 straight, and those wins were enough for an invitation from Dana White. Prochazka had a colorful debut, knocking out Volkan Özdemir. Then he was given former belt challenger Dominic Reyes, who Jiri knocked out. After that he got a chance to challenge Glover Teixeira for the world title. The fight was very entertaining and competitive. However, at the end of the fight Prochazka manages to catch the Brazilian in a choke hold and become world champion. But then he declares that he got a serious injury and in order not to delay the division, leaves the belt vacant. Let's start with the Magome's striking technique. In his last fight he surprised a lot of people in a negative way. Everyone was expecting him to declass him, to destroy Blachowicz, but in the end he kicked him in the leg and Jan easily outworked the Dagestani. Magome's last fight really screwed up all his regalia before, and now it is unclear what he will be like next. He is going to correct his mistakes and fight like he did against Anthony Smith, or he is going to show again the same version of himself as he did against Blachowicz. We can only speculate about that. But in my opinion it was not a very good night for Magomed. Something may have happened or something like that. Now moving on to Jiri Prochazka's punching technique, and before his injury he was showing masterful performances in the style of Tony Ferguson. As long as he's young, that style will work. His speed makes him outplays his opponents without leaving them a chance to win. He also has a difference from El Chuchui. Tony virtually never knocked out his opponents. There were occasions, but it was rare. And Jiri on the other hand showed that if he got a good shot, his opponent would fall to the canvas. I think everyone saw the Prochazka vs Reyes fight. The Czech showed his whole nature in that fight. That kind of beating hasn't happened since Tony Ferguson's peak. Elbows, hard punches to the face. That was truly a legendary fight. Also worth mentioning is his last fight against Teixeira, where he also showed the beauty of his fighting technique. What about favorite? Well, if we take into account the previous fight, I still believe in Magomed. I think he will pull himself together, and in the next fight will show a new version of himself. Now on to Jiri Prochazka's wrestling game, where we'll also have plenty to talk about. Prior to the title fight against Glover, Jiri didn't show much of his skill on the canvas. Only punches and, in extreme cases, ground finishes. The big question for the fans was whether he could hold his own against the Brazilian. And as we realized, he could. Yes, there were episodes in which Teixeira took dangerous positions. But we can say that the fight was on the opposite course. Prochazka would shake Glover in one of the hits, or the Brazilian would hit well. It was the same with the wrestling. I could not find any other examples where Jiri showed his wrestling technique. He entered the UFC as a fighter with a name and regalia behind him. So he was led down a separate, simpler path. Now let's move on Ankalaev wrestling skills. Magomed is really good in this area. It was his skills on the bottom floor that helped him bring the fight to at least a draw. In the light heavyweight division, I don't know anyone else who could fight so well and possibly overpower Magomed. Though his base was and still is the stand-up, in critical situations he uses wrestling. As an example, I can safely mention the fight with January. As a result of numerous low kicks thrown by the pole, Magomed could not stand firmly on his feet, and he had to move Blachowicz to have a break and control the fight for the remaining time. This was not an isolated incident. More than once he moved and controlled his opponents. As far as parterre and everything else goes, he's just as good. The only thing he doesn't use is the painful hold, but otherwise he's unstoppable. I think Magomed Ankalaev will also be the favorite here. I think Magomed Ankalaev will win this fight by unanimous decision of the judges. If he has problems in the stand-up, then he will take Prochazka to the canvas and counter the fight. What do you guys think? Let us know what you think in the comments. Bye everybody.